Well, one thing that I want to say, and that's what brings me hope, is that this is probably one of the fastest moving fields in biology right now. And there's studies that are being published every single day on polygenic risk scores. And these polygenic risk scores do become more predictive. And what's also very important is that they also become more work for multiple ancestors living in multiple populations. And therefore, they just become better every single day. So as long as we don't just do it once, we calculate one polygenic risk score and then assume that this is going to be forever. This is a moving field, so these scores could be calculated a multiple amount of times as soon as the new information becomes available.
Welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast, where we simplify the complex world of precision medicine. We're here to explore how personalized healthcare can empower you to understand and improve your health to live a longer and healthier life. Join us as we break down the latest in medical science into actionable insights. Let's make precision medicine accessible and actionable for everyone. This episode is sponsored by Biography Health, where DNA-powered healthcare is designed just for you. Biography Health is a HIPAA-compliant precision medicine platform that equips providers with AI-driven recommendations powered by your genetics, health history, and clinical insights, all while keeping data private, secure, and independent from large EHR systems. If you're a provider ready to bring precision medicine into your practice, visit biographyhealth.com to learn more. Or if you're a patient who wants your doctor to explore this, point them our way. We'll help them bring personalized healthcare to life. As a reminder, this episode is for educational purposes only. This episode is in no way a replacement for professional health advice. Please consult with your professional primary care provider for medical advice. If at any point you feel that a topic discussed on our podcast was misrepresented, or if you have additional insights that could enhance our discussions, we wholeheartedly encourage you to reach out to us. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us improve and in ensuring our content remains both informative and reflective of the latest developments in precision medicine. Hey everyone, welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Stanford, and then we're actually bringing a repeat guest back, our Chief Scientific Officer over at Biography Health, Dr. Yelena Bykhovskaya. Welcome back to the show. For today's episode, originally I wanted to talk about polygenic risk scores and monogenic variants, but I actually want to just focus on polygenic risk scores, because what has been fascinating with hearing and talking to different physicians, it almost seems like there's two split audiences with polygenic risk scores. One that says we could use this data, others where they think the evidence is a little bit too premature and there's not enough evidence there. So I'm excited to just dive in and really just talk through some of these concerns, objections, and really just get, just an overall baseline of what polygenic risk scores are, and then also how it's being utilized and where some of the unknown really is. So starting off, since we're trying to make this as simple as possible, why don't we dive into how do we define polygenic risk scores first? So what is a polygenic risk score?
So basically, I guess what I wanted to kind of start is just a tiny little bit review of what genetics is and how genetics has been used in a clinical practice, and what happened to it in the last 20 years that actually made us a bit empowered us to be able to bring it to the population screening. Because genetics is a very old discipline of medicine, of science, and it's been used very in the medicine. However, the way it's been used, it's for a very small portion of diseases, because what it said what it describes is just diseases that are single gene diseases, right? So diseases that we heard and we know, like sickle cell anemia and cystic fibrosis. But then after the year 2000, what happened is Human Genome Project took hold, and we discovered the sequence of basically all human genes and non-coding sequence. And that actually laid the foundation for use this information in the patient care or in more for diagnostic and clinical settings. And also the sequencing technology developed from Sanger sequencing, a very slow and expensive way, to something called the next generation sequencing, which reduced cost and increased the speed and actually enable to sequence somebody's genome in a few days. Well, as a matter of fact, I think right now it's in a matter of one day. I'm sure that it's going to be in a matter of hours, sometime soon. So then the single gene disorders that we were used to, we now can moved on into something called complex genetics, and that complex genetics is actually what interests us, because we want to assess genetic risks for something like cardiovascular disease, atrial fibrillation, Alzheimer's disease. The list is endless. Macular degeneration. These are diseases that have genetic predisposition, yet these are not in most individuals single gene disorders. So this is where the polygenic risk scores and actually complex genetics, polygenic way of genetic risk comes across, and it's only been we've only been able to do it since 2003, or as a matter of fact, since the first GWAS study, or genome-wide association study, was published in 2005 and identified several loci for age-related macular degeneration. So that's when the polygenic risk actually came into play, and this is why we're now talking about it. So what it is we operate under the assumption that majority of human diseases are not caused by a single gene or single mutation, single pathogenic variant. These are all the ways of saying the same thing, where a single bad change in a sequence causes a malfunction of the gene and causes a disease. So what we have here is a compound effect where multiple small detrimental changes in different genes or in non-coding sequence that leads to different to also some functional changes, functional non-coding changes, lead to the disease altogether, right, in a combined fashion. So the way to we don't exactly know how many of those small changes happen in the genome to exceed the threshold. So I think a lot of people who are cautious about polygenic risk scores are really saying we don't know enough. So it's not that they don't believe in the whole in the process or in this mechanism. It's just that they say that we don't know enough about how many genes, how many variants are involved in certain disease, and therefore, based on this limited knowledge, they feel that they want to wait until we have a better knowledge, right? And therefore, the polygenic risk scores are better. Well, one thing that I want to say, and that's what brings me hope, is that this is probably one of the fastest moving fields in biology right now. And there's studies that are being published every single day on polygenic risk scores, and these polygenic risk scores do become more predictive. And what's also very important is that they also become more work for multiple ancestries, meaning in multiple populations. And therefore, they just become better every single day. So as long as we don't stay, we don't just do it once. We calculate one polygenic risk score and then assume that this is going to be forever. This is a moving field, so these scores could be calculated multiple amount of times as soon as the new information becomes available. So from my point of view, something like recalculation every 6 months would be a great way to cover this particular drawback of not having all the information, and allows us to incorporate more information. So that's just one of the things that it's very important. And it is also important, like some people don't realize that, but monogenic field is also doesn't stay where it is, right? There's a new information about monogenic variants that being deposited every single day as well. It just doesn't get updated every day, but it gets updated every 3 months. So genetics is a moving field, and as long as you can keep up with the updates, you can get the great knowledge that cannot come from anywhere else. Because your polygenic risk, just as your monogenic risk, it's a completely unrelated risk, unrelated to any of your clinical risks or any of your clinical measurements, right? And it just shows that what's in your genes, right? So it is a very important piece of the puzzle that kind of shows what is it in your body, how these things function, and what is the potential, your potential for developing a certain disease. If you have a high polygenic risk, that means you have a high potential. And if you have a average and low polygenic risk, that means that you don't. But if you do have a high potential, there's a number of clinical scenarios that doctors can use and come up with, very effective ways of negating this high polygenic risk and, working around it. And for somebody with a high polygenic risk to maintain good health for a longer time.
Right. Okay. So I had a lot of just aha moments in here. Even though I've been saying the words polygenic risk and then monogenic, I didn't even realize it was just within the actual name itself. So like monogenic,
monogenic,
poly, multiple genes. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think about that until earlier. There's one other part that you talked about though. So with polygenic risk scores, the interaction between multiple genes, then you mentioned that like 6 months down the line, there could, you could do a reanalysis of these polygenic risk scores and there could be new information. But what has been kind of, at least difficult for me to comprehend is it almost seems like there's just like different maybe it's equations or algorithms to come up with a polygenic risk score or probability to get, let's say, cardiovascular disease or Alzheimer's disease. And so, I mean, how does one sift through like, I guess the updates in these algorithms? And then even if there's like two different companies that offer polygenic risk scores, then like, how do you know which one to then lean into versus the other? And I guess how I think about it is almost like making a cake, right? Like if you have a chocolate cake, there's multiple recipes to create that chocolate cake. Some might be better, some might not. I guess you can't really taste polygenic risk scores in this case. Am I thinking about this correctly?
No, I love it. I absolutely love it. That's exactly how it is. What is the recipe? How much of a certain ingredient do you have to add? Well, in polygenic risk scores, instead of ingredients, your flour, your sugar, you have your variants. Okay, so these are common variants across the genome, right? And every variant comes with a value. right? So it's effect ratio, right? It's a mathematical concept of how much risk does a carrying a certain variant add to your chances of developing disease. That's all it is. And then all of those risks are added together, and that the number is a cake is being baked. A PRS is being calculated. So yes, you're absolutely right. There's a multitude of ways that these PRSs can be calculated. So from what is happening in the field, there is, first of all, this is a publicly led effort. So no company in the world has, enough information to be able to develop polygenic score based on just its own databases and just its own data. But on the bright side, there's publicly available data sets and publicly available data. It's available. It's available to researchers. It's available to companies that develop polygenic scores. Okay. So the difference between different polygenic scores could be significant or it could be little. And it's all based on different combinations of SNPs and analysis of different data sets and coming up with a recipe. Okay. So there's also, there's no right or wrong way of looking at it. So perhaps maybe together with a cake, there's just the information, right? So some polygenic scores will be more informed and some will be less informed. So what you want to go with the most comprehensive, the most informed way to predict. Okay. So with a cake, that actually may not work. So your best cake may actually have less ingredients than your your least favorite cake. But with polygenic rescore, every additional study and every additional work brings additional insights. So the polygenic rescores are described by something called area under the curve. Okay, so it's predictive ability. So if something has area under the curve of 0.5, okay, it's an easy concept. That is a coin toss. Okay, there is no predictive value, and so it doesn't work. It doesn't help you. Now, everything above 0.5, right, up to 1, where it's a fully predictive, when it completely predicts with 100% accuracy whether you develop disease or not, is considered to be a polygenic risk. Now, in clinical models, from my work, and there is no magic number. Okay, no one will tell you. So anything about, so you want it to be 100%, but we're talking about complex diseases, right? And limited knowledge. So we are limited, and therefore it's unrealistic to think that we will ever develop 100%. But something between above a 70% or a 0.7 area of the curve, it is considered to be, first of all, statistically significant, and second of all, helpful in determining someone's risk. So as long as your PRS has a predictive ability, okay, of above 0.7, then you're in good shape, and you can use that PRS.
Okay, so you mentioned statistically significant, but then also limited. One of the common objections that I've heard then is the data that we currently have is mostly based off of the Eastern European population, and there isn't necessarily enough data across other populations. So like, I guess how I think about it, if we're going to go back to the whole cake analogy, then it's like, are your ingredients sourced, like let's say you're making a German chocolate cake, your ingredients are sourced only in Germany, that chocolate cake's going to taste very different than a cake that's made in the US that you might call a German
great analogy
cake then.
I like that. Or let's say you don't want a basic cake because basic cake doesn't fit everybody, right? You want to add a little bit of ethnic spices into it. Okay. Okay. I think some people are gonna crucify us for this. Okay. But the idea is that European PRSs, well, let me tell you, first of all, European PRSs work. Okay, they work for a lot of populations. I don't want people to think that they don't work at all for other ethnic groups. It's not true. They do work. Their predictability though is lower. So that's why nearly every PRS that we have right now will be tested and the bioinformatician will work to make it more better and more predictable by using information from other populations, other ethnic groups. And so its accuracy and its area under the curve will be higher and will be close to the one in European population. So the way that they do it, there's two ways. You can add multiple other variants or remove ones that don't work for certain ethnic groups, right? Or you can adjust the effect sizes, right? And work on that. I know this is a little bit technical, but I think what I want to the thought to bring across is that this is not dead end. We are not at a dead end. There's a lots of ways that geneticists are thinking about it and trying to fix these issues, and they're fixing them. So there are papers published, and every single paper will, in addition to determining the PRS for European population, will show how that PRS is going to perform in the non-European populations. And a lot of them, actually, a lot of PRS is being developed right now perform quite well. So adding this information that comes from other ethnicities, other populations, make PRSs more predictable. And there's also a way when a patient sample is submitted to determine what ethnicity this sample is. This is a very basic process that could be done just before the PRS is calculated, and then appropriate algorithm will be used to include that information and to calculate better PRS.
Now, the method of getting these PRS scores, though, I mean, there's a company out there that did exome sequence, they just exome sequencing, so not as much as whole genome sequencing. I mean, is there still value? I mean, I can imagine there's probably a little bit of value just based on just what was sequenced there, but those PRS scores probably aren't going to be as predictive as whole genome sequencing. Does that make a significant difference? Both of you are nodding your head.
Yes, okay. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question. So first of all, you cannot calculate the PRS from exome sequencing because the majority of variants are being used in the PRS are located in the non-coding portion of the genome. And therefore, exome sequencing that only looks at coding portion will not be able to visualize those variants. So you will not have those variants. But what people do is there's additional techniques where there's something called a low pass whole genome sequencing, where you sequence just very kind of low quality, but it gets you to the variants that you need to use for PRS. Or alternatively, there's a good and old method of genotyping. And I think that's the data that originally has been used for PRS calculation. When you don't sequence, you just genotype. You find certain positions across the genome. So these positions, they start at 300,000, they go up to 2 million, 4 million, I don't know. Some of the bigger chips have those maybe 4 million variants. And then you use that information to calculate PRS score. So to be honest with you, PRS scores are somewhat robust as long as you have the information on the right variant for it. It doesn't matter how you receive the information. You could receive it through sequencing and you could receive it through genotyping. But if you don't have the information, then your power is going to be dropped. So it is very important to have the right information about the right variants. Now, a lot of programs will give you an error message when or some kind of a QC quality assurance, quality control issue when a certain threshold, a certain number of SNPs are not available to calculate your PRS, and so people won't do it. So it's in other words, it doesn't matter how you got the information as long as you have all the right information to calculate those PRS scores. You'll be fine. Sequencing or genotyping.
So now speaking just like within the quality of the data, is that what makes the difference between research and clinical? Like, does it need to reach a certain standard? Like how does that bridge come from like research grade PRS scores to clinical grade PRS scores?
I think for PRS scores, this bridge, it's not yet crossed, or in a way that there's no strict guidelines of how the PRSs, clinical PRSs versus the research PRSs. So I think the guidelines comes just from generally any lab test. Okay. So we'll look at accuracy, we'll look at reproducibility, right? So all of those things. We'll look at, people look at what tissue the DNA comes from. Does it come from saliva? Does it come from blood? Is there, a buccal swab, or, what is the concordancy between those PRSs, right? So this is the way. This is how the clinical accuracy or clinical value is being assessed. There's no clinical determination of PRS because there's no positive control, right? So in a way that you just want it to be accurate and reproducible from wherever you calculate it, but in a way that, like, for example, if you have a mutation, right, there is a positive control that comes with mutation, and that individual is diseased, right? It has a disease. Now with polygenic risk score, because not every single individual who has a high polygenic risk score will develop a disease. There's like some people will, some people won't. So you could have an individual with high PRS score that never develops a disease, right? There's some of them, but majority of them will develop. So that's your predictability, right? So it's just a different concept of looking at PRSs. You don't look at it per individual, you look per population. This is a population kind of a metric. And it comes with that kind of a drawback, something uncertain, right? There's uncertainty that comes with it. And I think that William probably actually is a good person to comment on it, perhaps, this kind of level of uncertainty that will never go away with this particular metric, because there will always be people who have a high PRS and never develop a disease, and there will always be people who we don't see a high PRS for, yet they do develop a disease, right? Perhaps because of environmental factors, or perhaps this is not a fully complete set of markers or set of variants that can be used.
Yeah, that's a great point, Yelena. With everything we're doing in personalized precision medicine, there's a a high degree of a probabilistic nature in it, and really we incorporate all this information in a Bayesian type of way. That is, we give higher weight to certain information. It's always worth noting that a disease that has a 1% prevalence, even if you're at 3 times the average risk of that disease for gender and ethnically matched people, still means there's a 97% chance you don't get it. So I always like to use the analogy of counting cards in Vegas. You're just trying to put your thumb on the scale and tip things in your favor to whatever degree you can. So that's that is the approach, and it's really important to make that point that just because you're at increased risk for something doesn't mean you're going to get it. It still may mean there's an overwhelming probability you don't get it. And that's an important message to lead off with, and with patients that are in personalized precision medicine care plans.
Well, and as a follow-up question, Dr. Sanford, I mean, you've vetted a lot of different companies and utilizing these PRS scores. Then, like, what were some of those things that you looked for that I guess during your due diligence to say that I wanted to use this company over the other?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and again, it's a little Kentucky windage, so to speak. My estimation and how I look at it. The first thing you're looking for, and when I started using polygenic risk scores, 4 or 5 years ago, it's looking for concordance between different companies using different algorithms, looking at different gene sets to come to it. And if and I would look at multiple at a time, so maybe as many as 3 different companies with the same patient, the same disease, but with 3 different algorithms, so to speak, and ways of calculating. So looking for concordance, also looking to see what may match the extended family history, to see if does this seem right? And then some of the polygenic risk scores like hypertension, the probability of developing hypertension that was high. What's this patient's blood pressure? If they're, same with lipids, high polygenic risk score for having a high LDL. So there are, and lipoprotein little a, and obesity and diabetes. And so you get a sense of looking at the patient holistically, the entire patient, and lining that up. And you can develop a spidey sense of who seems to be getting it most accurately. And who, yeah, and is there concordance? And then again, looking at what Yelena mentioned about looking at area under the curve. What is the data showing for what they're doing? And of course, the best way for me to figure out if a PRS score is worth anything is go to the next door office to Yelena and say, is this any good?
Right.
Because she's the
So
expert.
we definitely evaluate every single company, and we work with leaders, people who developed these PLRS scores, who've been in the field for a decade, and who have expertise in developing. I just wanted to add in terms of, so William mentioned high blood pressure. So I have a personal story, a short one to tell. So I've developed I've been very good and showing in my primary care physician's office for years. And every time I would show up, my blood pressure would be slightly elevated. But I'm also a very active person. I run, I eat healthy. I'm very active. So she would always tell me that I probably have this white coat syndrome, and she wouldn't put me at, she wouldn't prescribe blood pressure lowering medications to me until at some point, like I think 4 years ago, she finally said, you know what? No, this is too much. Like, I've seen this way too many times. And, you should be taking a blood pressure medication. And meanwhile, I've done some home studies, and every time I would take a blood pressure at home, it would be elevated. But it took her literally 4 years to put me on a high blood medication. So guess what? I just did my whole genome sequencing, and I calculated my polygenic risk score, and I have a high polygenic risk score for blood pressure, high blood pressure. So had I known that before, I would have started taking this high blood pressure medication years in advance, because it's clear that somebody with a high genetic risk like mine, who cannot just run your way out of high blood pressure. You have to actually take a medicine for it. And I've been taking a medicine for the last 4 years. My blood pressure had never been high. It's very well controlled. I only wish I could do it earlier and avoid, all the health effects that have been done to my body because of it.
Yeah, and that's a great, segue into the concept of you want to use those polygenic risk scores in the context of the entire patient. So what their health and lifestyle, diet, body weight, and high blood pressure really important, because I think that for many, many years was underappreciated. As we heard 10 or 20 years ago, oh, watch your blood pressure, you might have a stroke. But what we know now is that in terms of longevity and avoiding those other chronic diseases like Alzheimer's disease or heart disease or atrial fibrillation, good control of blood pressure, and the lower is better, assuming you're not having symptoms of lightheadedness and the like, is better. And if there had been, for Yelena, and that great example, a personalized approach to her, she might have been on medications much sooner. But of course, it's none of those things have transpired with her, so it's not too late. And she'll benefit from good control of her blood pressure.
Right, right. And then that goes for a number of different diseases where when you determine your genetic risk, and your genetic risk is complex, so you have to do a polygenic risk score. There's no other way for you to see a complex genetic risk but by PRS. So with all its imperfections, I just want to stress that this is the only way that genetic risk for complex diseases could be established. Okay, and I think it's priceless. That I love, I'm very I'm a big proponent. So every apologetic risk score I will definitely do, and whether I feel that there may be not enough information, I'm gonna wait a little bit and see if it gets better. That's a different story, but it gives you some ideas, and that you can change your life and your clinical, outcome.
And I think that the one thing I want to emphasize with what Yelena is saying is there's good science. This isn't just someone's wild ass idea of what might be an interesting way to predict risk. There's solid science behind this.
Yes. I want to stress that too. There is literally hundreds of publications, thousands in Nature Medicine, Nature Genetics, American Journal of Human Genetics, all of these high top publications. I think even New England Journal of Medicine, there's been some. So there's definitely a connection. It's a real way, a real scientific method of looking at something that you can't really assess any other way but this.
And with the rate of increase of the data set, so to speak, to analyze that is the number of people that have been sequenced, and also just the computing capability as that increases, and the ability to analyze these huge data sets of your hundreds of thousands of genetic variants to find the ones that would be important to include in a polygenic risk. It's just going to get better and better and better, but also worth noting, it's ready now.
Yeah.
it's helpful now.
It's already
Down,
works.
down the road, it's liable to be very, very, very predictive and accurate, as more work and effort gets put into it. And again, the ability to look at those enormous data sets and how the genes play together.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the future of PRS scores and just the utilization of hopefully everybody being able to see it and all the providers being able to use it and et cetera. And I'm sure we're going to be getting more questions from this episode too. So if you're listening to this and you have additional questions, please reach out to us. And all of our contact information, well, especially Dr. Stanford and Dr. Bykhovskaya's email is going to be there as well. So you two, thank you so much for hopping onto the podcast. Who knows, if the more questions come up, we might even talk more about polygenic risk scores in another episode for a part 2. So thank you two for coming by. Thanks everyone for listening, and we all see you next time.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks for joining us on the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. If this episode inspired you to learn more about your health, please leave us a review and share the podcast with a friend. Your feedback helps spread the word about the power of precision medicine. Remember, taking action today can lead to a healthier tomorrow. See you next time.